Welcome to part 2 of the Christmas book box tutorial, and I've started by taking two 12 by 12 sheets of cardstock and cutting them at 10 and 5/8, and then on the 12-inch side of this one I've got some 1/4-inch tape, and I'm going to use this to adhere the two together, and I'm going to use this edge of the tape as a guide for this right side of this paper, so I'll just line them up top and bottom, and then using that tape as a guide, I'll tape them together like that. So I have a suggestion on what I would have done differently. I would have cut my chipboard for my cover a little bit bigger from here to here. And so if you remember, I cut it 8 and 5/8 inch square here, and then the spine is also 8 and 5/8 by 2 3/4. I would cut these to 8 and 3/4 from here to here. So your spine would be 8 and 3/4 by 2 and 3/4, and then these would be 8 and 3/4 by 8 and 5/8. Because I just think that would give you a little bit more room from side to side, and so I barely have enough room for my cover to cover my box. I mean, it's just a little too close for comfort for me. So you can see here, you can see the edge of the box when I'm just holding it in place like that. So I'm really going to have a hard time gluing my box in and getting that so that that cover is good. If you cut your chipboard to 8 and 3/4, you won't have any problems. It'll just, even if you get it slightly crooked, it's just going to cover just fine. If you do the 8 and 3/4, then you're just going to need to add when you cut your cardstock, instead of cutting it 10 and 5/8, you're going to cut it at 10 and 3/4. And so you'll have a piece that's 12 inches by 10 and 3/4, and a piece that was, I can't remember how I said to cut it, but the height this way is 10 and 3/4. Okay. Okay, so I've drawn a faint line on the left side of my paper at 1 inch and then 1 inch on the bottom, and that's going to be a guide for me to place this chipboard here. And I've cut two pieces of chipboard at 8 and 5/8 by 8 and 5/8, and I have backed everything with double-sided tape. You could use a liquid adhesive if you prefer. And then I've got one chipboard piece at 2 and 3/4 and 8 and 5/8, and so I'm going to go ahead and get this side on. Okay, now I'm going to take some 1/4-inch tape and put this on the edge of the left side of the chipboard. Alright, and I'm going to use that as a guide to place my spine piece of right here. Okay, so now I'm going to put another piece of 1/4-inch tape here also on the left side of this piece. Okay, so I've got all my chipboard pieces on, and now I'm going to miter the corners. And I have this handy dandy little tool that somebody gifted to me, so I'm going to take advantage of it instead of measuring. But if you were to measure to cut your corners, what you would need to do is measure about 1/8 of an inch from the corner, and then you would cut on an angle, like that. So this little tool's already measured for that. And then also I have an extra inch here on the left side, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. The next step, I am going to show you one side, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish it off camera because it's very tedious. And I'm going to put this double-sided tape on along the four sides of the chipboard like that, and I'll do all the sides here, and then I'm going to also do that on the edge of my paper. So I'll get that on and then I'll be right back. Alright, so now I have all my tape pieces on, and I went ahead and burnished all of the tape down onto the paper and the chipboard. And so now I'm just going to fold everything over onto the chipboard. And again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to quickly remove the tape backing and do that, and some of it might be off camera. Alright, I'm going to take my tool and run across the edge of the chipboard just to reinforce that fold there. And now I'm going to take my chipboard and press along the table and start folding that cardstock. And now I'm taking my bone folder and running along the edge of the chipboard. So using my bone folder, I'm going to go ahead and press the rest of the paper all the way down onto the chipboard. And now the same for the opposite side. Alright, so now I'm going to take my bone folder and fold these excess corner in where it was mitered, and I'm just going to press that along the chipboard here. So that way that when I fold this paper over, I get a nice tight corner. Okay, so now that I have all my edges folded over, I'm going to take my bone folder and then very, very gently reinforce the crease right here where the chipboard is. And you have to do this very gently or you'll rip or poke a hole through your paper. And then I'm just going to fold this up and just keep reinforcing that fold. And then part of the advantage of putting that 1/4 inch tape in the center is that this is going to grab that tape and just stay where I want it to stay. And then I'm going to do this side as well. And then I'm going to turn around and do the other sides. This paper I've chosen to use is not the best quality paper for this. So we'll see how this holds up. I did not use a good linen cardstock. It's really hard to do this, I think, when you're not using a really good cardstock. Not necessarily the weight or the texture, but that it has durability. The linen papers just seem to be able to fold and crease better than other papers. All right, so now the construction of my book cover is complete, and now I just need to cover the inside, and my cover is going to sit like this, and so this will be the back, the front, and so it's going to open up like that. It's just really easier to show you this way with the camera angle. So the side that the box is going to set on is not going to need any cover for this chipboard here because the box will cover it up. All right, so I decided to use the green paper that's on the cover for the center of the inside spine, and so this measures 4 3/4 by 8 1/2. I used this double-sided tape to adhere it to the center, and then I just burnished it down with my bone folder, and then I proceeded just how you saw me do before. I just went along the edge of this chipboard here to reinforce that crease and just slowly worked my chipboard up like this, and you know, just not poking into the paper. I've kind of got it just at an angle here, and I'm really just trying to get that crease there along that chipboard like that. And then the same thing on this side, and just reinforcing that fold there and folding it up. And then when that was done, I turned it around and did the same thing on this side. Just really reinforce that fold along the edge of the chipboard, and then do the same thing here. And then that's it. So the next step is to place a ribbon closure on the ends here, and I'll be back. Oh, and then on this piece here that's in the middle, I cut this one 8 1/2 by 4 3/4. I would leave that the same. So your paper, this paper here in the middle, is just going to be in a little bit more, and that's just fine because our decorative paper is 8 1/2 by 8 1/2, and we want these pieces to line up. And you have plenty of room here. You have an inch, so you can cut that one at 8 1/2, and then this paper will line up with this paper here, and then you're not going to have a whole bunch of different lines of paper on the ends, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, just trust me, you want to cut this paper 8 1/2 by 4 3/4 and just center it from here to here, as well as from here to here. So I thought about using this ribbon for a ribbon closure, and it looks nice, but I'm just not sure that's what I want to do. So I decided to make some kind of a magnet closure and see if I like that better. So I have 2 pieces of paper here. One is 1 3/4 by 2 1/2, and then I scored along the 2 1/2 side at 1/2 inch, and then I went ahead and placed a magnet in the center there, about a fingertip away from the unfolded edge, and I've just covered the whole thing with double-sided tape. And then I've got a piece of paper here that is 1 3/4 by 3 inches, And I drew a little line here that is it's about at 1/2 an inch from the score line, and I think I want the edge of this paper to line up against that line that I drew. I don't know if you can see that. It's really kind of hard to see. I drew a little line with my pencil right there. So I'm going to have the edge of this line up along that line that I drew, and then of course I want my paper to be side to side. And then I have to measure it against the box to know where to fold it on the other side. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. So, and so I want the magnet to set there. So what I'm going to do, what I usually do when I'm lining up 2 pieces of paper is I'll put a piece of the backing from the double-sided tape onto the paper, snap my magnet in place, and then I'll add some glue. And then I'm going to line everything up, line this paper from edge to edge there. And it wants to move around a little bit, so so I'm just going to let that set for a minute and dry, and then I'm going to lift the whole thing up. And I'm going to use my double-sided tape to tape that in place. That is lining up on the edges there, and so that's going to be fine. So now what I want to do is I've got a piece of paper here that is 2 by 1 3/4, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that onto the back of this one right here. And excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hold off on doing that to this one just yet. Okay, so this is going to be the bottom part of the magnet closure. So I'm going to have to hold this up this way. So it's gonna, that little tab there that we scored is going to fit underneath the box like so. So now I've attached the top part of the closure to the bottom with the magnet, and I'm just folding it over the box so that I know where to score the top flap that will be attached to the cover. So I'm gonna hold this up again. Oh my goodness. And so, yeah, I scored this at 5/8 from this edge, so opposite from where the magnet is. And so that's going to fold over like this. And it'll set like so. I'm going to actually glue this side to the box. And then I'm going to glue my box onto this side of the cover. This is the bottom piece that we covered on the back. We covered the magnet. I'm going to mark the center of this. So let me get my Tim Holtz ruler. It should be from side to side, it should be 7/8. Yeah. And then so I'm going to mark the center here. And let me make sure I've got my, I drew those little lines in my box, remember, so I have to figure out which way is which. So I'm going to go ahead and mark a line on the center of my box, and then let's just say it's right here. And then I will go ahead and glue those two marks together like that so that I have this in the center on the front. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. So anyway, I've got this bottom glued on here. I drew my line, I centered everything, and then I also rounded the corners, which I do recommend that you round off each piece before you glue them together. I had a really hard time getting my, unless you have like a corner chomper that chomps through a chipboard, but I had a hard time getting this through my regular corner rounder. It was a little bit thick. So now I'm ready to glue my box to the bottom of the cover, and I'm going to be using this Crafter's Pick Ultimate Craft Glue. It doesn't dry as fast as this art glitter glue, and so it's going to give me time to adjust my box and lining it up on the cover. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this on, and then I will be back. Okay, so I've cut a piece of paper that is 1 3/4 by 2 1/2, and I rounded the corners this time. And so I'm just going to go ahead and glue this here to cover up my magnet, and also to give this a little bit more weight or sturdiness. Again, I'm attaching the top part of the closure with the magnet, and I need to mark on the book cover where to line that up so that I can glue it on. And I'm just marking right here where I want the edge of that paper to be. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this on. And then I'm going to go ahead and erase my marks. And there you have a closure. So I have my dividers. All right, so this part's going to get a little bit tricky because I'm going to be, pushing some of these pieces together, and I really don't want this to be tilted one way or the other, so I'm going to be pulling out my ruler and adjusting things, and hopefully my glue doesn't dry super quick, or it'll be another one of those woulda, coulda, shoulda. Gosh, I'm having a hard time. I hurt my arm really bad, so I'm having a hard time holding things up with this left arm. And I think I might try to run a little bit of glue on this one edge. I cannot see my line. There it is. And I'm going to stick this one in here just so that I can be able to butt that up against there. going to burnish those edges down. I'm going to turn the box this way so I can see. And it's not as tight as I had hoped it would be. Let's see. Maybe I got the two pieces mixed up. I don't know. Yeah, I should have gotten this just a little bit tighter. Just a little bit tighter. It's just not quite holding in place. It's loose here. So you can see how important it is to get that pretty tight. I should have just went a little bit tighter and forced it in there a little bit more. The only thing I can do now is maybe try to run some glue on there and see if I can push it together, but I just don't know if that's going to work without making a big mess. Yeah, I made a big mess. Oops. Let's see. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and, well, that one does have a little bit of glue on it already, so, and push those two pieces together just to kind of keep it from, in the future though, I just don't know if it's going to stay. I just really didn't get it. It just really needs to be on that borderline between bowing and being not tight enough. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the glue to this one. Okay, last one. So I ended up trimming the left side of the flap so that I would have a little more space in between the left and the middle. I wanted 3 1/8 in between there, so I trimmed that left side flap about 1/8 of an inch, I think. And then on the right, I should have 4 1/8. And in the middle there, 3 1/8. And then the left is a little bit less than 1/2 inch. So this part by far is the hardest part, I think. Making the box isn't really hard, though I did struggle with this one for some reason. Somehow I got it crooked and I'm just not really sure what I did. To get it crooked, but I make boxes quite a bit and I usually don't have too much trouble, so I hope you don't get discouraged by watching me make my mistakes. And I forgot to add the glue on the sides. So somehow I'm going to have to try to add a little bit of glue there. Okay. Now we have our dividers in our box, and all we have left to do now is to add the papers and whatnot on the bottom. And then there's one other thing that I'm going to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this piece ready, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back, and I'm going to show you, we'll get to this in a minute. I'm going to show you what I've done so far. I have cut this piece for the back spine of the box, and I have started to cover this one, and I found this little green ribbon that matched. So I thought it'd be a combination of both. Would be nice to have the magnetic closure plus this little ribbon, and I've just tied it around. I am going to cover the back side of this. I just haven't decided what I'm going to use to cover that. And then I have this on the background here. I think I'm just going to leave this plain. And then on the inside, I used leftovers from, I had like 1.5 sheets of paper left. So this was what was left over, these two from the third piece of paper that I cut into. And this is actually what was on the top of this, because it was 8.5. And so I just put the bottom piece here and the top piece here. And I've cut them very tight and just kind of shoved them in there and worked them in with my bone folders. So they're pretty tight in there. But I mean, if you wanted rather do it with an offset, you could do that. And then this I cut into the fourth piece of paper, and then this is left over from like one of the first or second pieces of paper, and so that's what I'm going to use for this slot here. But I want this little place to be where I set my pen, and so because of that, let me get that out of the way. Because of that, I cut this chipboard pieces, the medium weight chipboard. So this is, I think this ended up being approximately 8 3/8. Again, this is one of those where you need to cut and fit to your own box, because you know the measurements may be a little different for your box. But mine's just, I think, a little bit less than 8 3/8. So getting the width can be a little trickier. What I did is I cut a piece of scrap chipboard, and I believe I cut this one at 3 3/4 and scored it at 1 3/8 on the side, and it ended up being just a little too wide. I mean, it was the exact width of the opening and just a little too tight in there. So what I ended up doing was eventually I came up with a width of 3 5/8, and I scored it 1 3/8 on each side, and that gave me the width I needed in the middle. You may need to adjust yours because no one box is going to be identical, just the way you place things and cut things.
And that's okay. That's why I used that little scrap paper to adjust my sizes. And then to score it, what I did is I took my trimmer and I just barely cut that top layer of paper on the chipboard. And then that created a score line so that I can fold the chipboard over. And then you also want to make sure that it's even on both sides, or else your insert will be lopsided or slide down on one side. So use a scrap and make sure you get it right. And then it's a lot easier to pull in and out of your box rather than to try to cut the full 8 3/8 piece. Now, again, it was just a little bit, ended up being a little bit less than 8 3/8 because I did have to slide that in there. But anyway, you can see me scoring the other side there, and then I get a nice folded piece to insert into my box.
But what I did is I just scored it here. I kind of, you know, measured off where I wanted the bird. So actually I think I started on this side, and I just scored the paper here where I wanted the side to be. And then I kind of just folded that a little bit and realized where I needed the score line. Then I scored it very lightly, scored it. And then this is going to go and set inside that little slot there. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this on and trim that down and stick it in the box, and then I'll show you what it looks like finished. Okay, so now I have that piece inserted onto this little slot here, and then my pens are going to be easily accessible because it's not so deep in the box. And yeah, I can fit like, you know, 1 or 2 in here, and maybe an eraser or something right here on the top or something smaller. So, you know, that is the completion of the construction of this box, and really all that's left now is for me to finish decorating it. And all right, so I just wanted to show you what I have done so far in decorating my box. Of course, the box was made to fit these 8.5 by 8.5 by papers perfectly, and like I did on the sides, when the paper was still wet with the glue, I took my eraser and rubbed on the edges just to give it that faded, distressed look. And also the same thing on this paper here. This is also just one of the 8.5 by 8.5 papers. And I did make a couple little changes on the closure. I ended up deciding to use this cute little cut apart card that says Winter Blessings. And so I did have to trim down the sides quite a bit, and I did trim the top, I believe, as well. And because of that, I did need to trim this top closure piece just a little bit. So I did that. I still had room compared to where the magnet was to trim that a little bit. And then I rounded the corners and then added my paper that I had already rounded the corners on. And then also this paper in the back, I just used a piece of the polka dot paper. So make sure that you know before you actually make your closure, you might want to decide beforehand what you're putting here so that you don't have to do that after the fact. Believe me, it's a lot easier to trim this and to round the corners when it's not already attached to the box. And then on the bottom, I added this green. I really wanted to keep the green in there. And then on the inside, I have this cute, this is also from one of the, I'm not sure what this is from actually. It could be from one of the papers. Anyway, or a cut apart card, I'm not sure. But I just really like the little candle there when you open that up. I thought that would be cute. And it's just all very wintry. I mean, there are elements of Christmas and it can go either way. but for reasons that I'll be explaining in my walkthrough video, I just I had already been using the more non-traditional colors for Christmas anyway, so I just thought I'd keep with that theme and kind of go with a more winter theme. So anyways, so thanks for watching. This will conclude the second part of the tutorial, and I would really appreciate it if you guys would give me that thumbs up or that hit that like button. And also, if you would subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can join me for my upcoming videos. So I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.